injuries on him?
Yes.
Okay. And did you discuss those with him, whether he needed any medical treatment or not?
Briefly, yes.
Okay. And did he say he did need medical treatment?
He said that he didn't, from what I recall when I first walked into the room. Later on in the interview, he said he was not sure.
Okay. And did you discuss that with him in terms of providing him an opportunity, if he so desired, to get medical treatment?
Yes.
And did he decline that?
Yes.
Okay. Did he complain of an injury when you were speaking of it, like my head is, just I can't think, I'm in pain, I just can't think? Did he ever express that to you?
No, he never said those things in that way.
That was Detective Doris Singleton, who questioned George Zimmerman at the station the night of the shooting. And as the prosecution continues its attempt to minimize the seriousness of Zimmerman's injuries, questions are being raised about how much injury is required before self-defense can be justified. Now, there are two Florida statutes that stand out regarding the law of self-defense. Now, first, justifiable use of deadly force, which states that the use of deadly force is lawful when a person is resisting any attempt to murder such person or to commit any felony upon him. Now, the second use of force in defense of person states a person is justified in the use of deadly force if he or she reasonably believes that such force is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm. Here to analyze, former D.C. homicide detective Rod Wheeler and defense attorney Anna Yum. Welcome, both of you. Rod,
hey,
I think the second part of that, great bodily harm, imminent death, seems that standard has been met here, unless the prosecution's hiding something and going to spring something upon us. Tell me I'm wrong.
Well, no, I think at this point, Sean, you are correct. I mean, when you actually look at all of the evidence that's been presented up to this point, I'll tell you, I haven't heard, the clear and convincing evidence that George Zimmerman actually committed a crime. However, if you look at the second part of that law, that self-defense law, it makes it clear, Sean, that you cannot put yourself in a position whereby you have to use deadly force. So in other words, you can't start a fight, you can't pick a fight, and then because you're losing the fight, now you're going to pull your gun.
But the jury heard today, which is amazing, because by introducing that tape, the jury heard George Zimmerman, in his own words, say that he was walking back to the car and he got hit, blindsided, and that he was going to lose consciousness, all the other things.
That's right. And they heard, well, Sean, they heard version 3. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Anna?
Well, what I wanted to say, Sean and Rod, is that the issue here is that it's not what actual injuries that George Zimmerman sustained, but what was his reasonable belief at the time? Did he reasonably believe that he needed to defend himself against imminent great bodily harm or death? And the problem that I have with what the prosecution is doing right now is that it's almost as though they would have the jury believe that there has to be some sort of checklist. If there's a broken nose and a broken jaw, that means that you can claim self-defense. If there's a broken nose and just lacerations on a head, you can't. That's not the issue. The issue was, what was his state of mind? Did he reasonably believe at the time that he pulled the trigger that he needed to use that force to defend himself against imminent bodily harm or death?
Well, wasn't that achieved, though, Anna, with the testimony of the one eyewitness in this case on Friday?
And I hear you on that, Sean. I think that with the witness saying that, it was achieved. But by virtue of the prosecution introducing George Zimmerman's own statements during their case in chief, it just bolsters what he's been saying from the beginning, which is, I needed help. I needed help. Someone please help me. And he said it 14 times.
Yeah, well,
but Anna,
I found out one piece of evidence. Apparently, my interview, I am told from my sources on the ground that they are going to play my interview tomorrow. And again, under no scenario is George Zimmerman going to be testifying in this trial anymore. He's got his testimony in with no cross.
You're exactly right, Sean, but I can tell you that.
I completely agree with you.
Yeah, Sean, your interview, Sean, I think is going to be version 5 of 4 versions that we've heard so far. And I think, Sean, that's going to be the strategy that the prosecution is going to use. They're clearly trying to show that everything this guy said has changed 3 or 4 times, and I think that's the only route they're going down at this point.
But that's
clearly,
not,
this case is not a case of second-degree murder.
They might have little minute differences, but the main story remains the same and has been totally consistent throughout. That's what's... Go ahead,
And that's
Anna.
what the detective said today. That's exactly what the detective said today. Just because there's minor inconsistency doesn't necessarily mean that someone's lying. And I think one of the most crucial pieces of evidence today was when the detective Serino testified that he believed that George Zimmerman was telling the truth, that he believed him to be credible. I believe he said either he's a pathological liar or he was telling the truth.
Right.
And I think that those minor inconsistencies are not going to debase and just cause the jury to believe that
Anna,
George Zimmerman's a liar.
Didn't he also say he told the truth and he was consistent? That doesn't help the
exactly
prosecution.
unusual.
Yeah, but you know, that's not
And he
unusual,
said he was
guys. I mean,
consistent.
but Anna, you know yourself, as a former prosecutor, a lot of times we will get suspects in, and they're going to be very consistent, especially if they are a pathological liar. So you can't really say that that's evidence in and of itself. Again, I don't think the prosecution has clearly made their case. I think there's going to be more evidence that comes along. We have to be fair to Zimmerman, but we also have to be fair to Trayvon.
Let me just say this. If this case were to end today, if this trial were to end today, I think it would be a not guilty verdict based upon the law
I agree.
and the evidence. And if I'm the prosecutor, I wouldn't introduce his statements
Anna,
because
well
that
said.
means that he's not going to testify.
I think they'd be nuts to let him testify. He got his statement
Absolutely.
out. And
Yeah, I agree with
it can
that too,
only go
Sean.
downhill from there. And there's no reason. He got his full statement in. And if they run the interview with me tomorrow, as I'm told they will, then I think whatever, quote, minor inconsistencies they think they found, I think the big picture story stays the same. Any of you disagree on that?
No, I completely agree with you, Sean. I think that if I'm the prosecutor in this case, I'm questioning that tactic. Why would you introduce these statements? Because now he's not going to testify. And trust me, when I was a prosecutor, I was salivating, chomping at the bit to cross-examine defendants.
Yeah, I
And
bet.
if
but
I'm
Anna,
Mark
it really
O'Meara,
just
I'm not putting
depends.
him on the stand.
Yeah, but real quickly, Anna, it just depends on how much weight you put into the multiple stories that he has given, coupled with the fact that there is other evidence and there is physical evidence. So again, I think all of that, the totality of that, is really what they're going to have to look at.
Yeah, I think
And I think it's going to be an uphill battle for the prosecution.
it's more than it's uphill vertical, and it's 500 miles. It's not going to happen. All right, guys, good to see you.
All right, Sean, you too.
Thanks, Sean.
Coming up next, we're going to have a live.